Today we're going to look at good Magic the Gathering cards, and I'm going to tell you why they are absolutely terrible. We're going to start off with Consecrated Sphinx, thanks to, who suggested this? Jess Marchand. All right, 6 mana, 4/6. Flying. When an opponent draws a card, you may draw 2 cards. In what world are you even casting this? Or where it actually resolves? There's a bunch of problems. In fact, if you play this and it actually resolves, and you even draw 2 cards, you are immediately the target at the table. There is no way all 3 opponents are going to let you live in even just 1 more second. Not to mention, there's going to be this huge battle to fight over this damn thing. So you have to be careful even if you put it on the battlefield. Your opponent's just going to steal it from you, and all of a sudden, your best card is being used against you. But yeah, very slow, clunky. It's also turns you into the target. This card is absolute abomination. Okay, we got, what do we have here? Archon of Emeria. Archon of Emeria, 3 mana, 2/3, flying. Each player can cast more than 1 spell each turn. Non-basic lands your opponents control enter the battlefield tapped. Fundamentally, this is basically a Wind Drake of some sort with just 3 toughness. I mean, what's the big deal of people playing no more than 1 spell each turn when they just play 1 huge individual bomb every single turn? I mean, you're going to get crushed by the mid-range decks. Who cares? If their first card they play is Farewell, well, say farewell to Archon of Emeria. So it's not really a strategic advantage to completely blow out someone for playing multiple spells a turn. Like, for the most part, the only time people play multiple spells early on in the game when they're getting their mana rocks out, getting their mana ready, all right? They play the Soul Ring, the Mana Crypt and stuff. By the time they get to turn 3, turn 4, they're just playing their largest spells. They only need 1 spell per turn. Archon of Emeria is absolute garbage. Next up, we've got Smothering Tithe from Kano. Smothering Tithe, a 4 mana enchantment. Whenever an opponent draws a card, that player may pay 2. If the player doesn't, you create a treasure token. What if everyone just keeps paying the 2? What are you gonna do? You spent 4 mana, they spent 2. Not to mention, again, people are gonna gang up on you. This is not one of those cards you can just play and decide and assume nobody is going to be staring at you. This is an enemy spotted type of card. And if they start letting you have treasures, you better believe they needed those cards and you're doomed anyway. That being said, little choking on the early game, but completely useless in the later game, where people are going to have as much mana as possible. If they all collude to pay for the thing, you're going to be the one that's done for. Big waste of 4 mana over there. Next, we have our first super chat comment straight from Robert. The Defiler of Vigor. What is this? Defiler. It's already in bad shape. I don't even know what this card is. The Defiler. This is a 5 mana 6/6 Phyrexian Worm with Trample and his additional cost to cast green permanent spells. You may pay 2 life. That sounds terrible. We're gonna pay 2 life on top of already casting the spell I wanted to cast without paying the life. Those spells cost green less to cast if you paid life this way. This effect reduces only the amount of green mana you pay. Whenever you cast a green permanent spell, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. Now here's the deal. You think you're getting a discount on your spells. Oh, I'm not going to be paying mana for my spells because I'm going to be paying my life. Except you forgot one thing. You had to pay for the Defiler of Vigor. And what the hell did you pay for it? You paid 5 mana. No, so effectively, oh, you're free, which is not even free. You have to still pay the colorless. You still have to pay in life, which is, not nothing. Even when you have 40 life in Commander, you still have to pay the 5 mana up front for this thing. And it's otherwise just a big, thick 6/6 dummy. Okay, next up, we got Contract from Below. That's illegal. Tell you, that's the biggest problem with that card. Next up, we'll go Toilet Ducks Radstorm. Radstorm, 4 mana instant with Storm, and it has Proliferate. Was that it? Like, what are you gonna proliferate up? Let's say you have like an infect creature. You dealt 1 damage to 1 person. I mean, the game's not over. You would have killed exactly 1 person on the battlefield. And also, I would have to ask, if you have a ton of creatures on the battlefield, what have your opponents been doing? Red Storm, if you're up against the right opponents, if you're in the right environment, I mean, it's literally doing nothing. This is basically the type of card that works if your opponents have been completely ignoring you the entire game. Also, they just let you do whatever you want. It's like, all right, everybody, let's just do whatever we want for 10 turns. All right, how's that going to work out? And then the Red Storm works out. If you're up against people who actually want to win the game, then Red Storm is literally going to do nothing. It's going to be too slow, too late. And it's like the weirdest storm card on top of that. If you're going to storm off with, like, Grape Shot for 100 billion. You're literally just upping the counters on the battlefield. Hand of Death. Oh, Necropotence. Necropotence is a... I want the real Necropotence. There we go. That's the real Necropotence. 3-mana enchantment. Skip your draw step. If you draw a card from your hand, remove that card from the game instead. Pay 1 life. Remove the top card of your library from the game face down. At end of your turn, put that card into your hand. So first off, you can't even make use of the cards immediately. That already takes the power of this card millions away from most of the combo decks out there. Not to mention, most people get Necropotence locked out of the game when you're playing Necropotence, where you have basically no life left and you're not drawing any more cards and you can't play cards in your hand. So you might have too many cards that cost too much mana and you have no means of gaining more life. And then, of course, there is the risk that you pay so much life that, you know, your opponents are starting to look at you. Oh, maybe we just deal 10 damage and you're already dead. So, you might be able to kill one person with the Necropotence, but don't be forgetting about the other two. Next super chat coming from Big Bungus Magoo. Thank you very much for your support. Possibility Storm. Possibility Storm. Isn't this just a jank card in the first place? It's 5-mana enchantment. Whenever a player casts a spell from their hand, that player exiles it, and then exiles cards on the top of their library until they exile a card that shares a card type with it. That player may cast that card without paying its mana cost. Then they may put the exiled cards with Possibility Storm on the bottom of their library in a random order. It literally doesn't even do anything. I mean, yeah, there are some combos with this. Like, you can only play 1 spell per turn, and this is, like, the second one. This is really, really awkward for a combo, if it's a combo at all. So, anyway, I'm 2 thumbs down on the Possibility Storm. Possibilities are not endless. This is just... And you look at the price tag on this card. If it was so good, it would be worth way more than $4. $4 is jank range, in my opinion. That is jank range for a card for a card that could be considered good. Okay, next up, we got Blast Offer with Delina Wildmage. This is a Gambler's Addict type of card. You want to get something... You want to get something out of this, but you need more moving puzzles than just your dice. It's a 4-mana 3/2. Whenever it attacks, choose target creature you control, then roll a d20. 1 to 14, create a tapped and attacking token that's a copy of that creature, except it's not legendary, and it has exile this creature at end of combat. Create 1 of those tokens, roll it again. So, I mean, there are combos with this card, but they're very fleshy combos, which are interacted with simply removal spells. So, not something I could entirely rely on, and it's not even guaranteed. You are still gambling on whether this on your roll. So in my opinion, Delina Wildmage, not good enough. She's a self-sufficient card. Create a tap and attacking token that's a copy of that creature. Choose target creature you control. I understand you can like play Delina Wildmage into another Delina Wildmage. Look, have you heard of Summoning Sickness? Everyone can. It's like, hey, I got a combo on the battlefield. Pass the turn. I can't use it until next turn. What are the odds that it's going to survive? All right. Combos that depend on Summoning Sickness, those aren't combos we can depend on. Noah Reese with the super chat. Fires of Invention. Complete card disadvantage. You're spending 4 mana for the ability to play 2 cards, but by the time that you play this, you have barely any cards left to play. You can cast spells only during your turn, and you can cast no more than 2 spells each turn. You may cast spells with converted mana cost less than or equal to the number of lands you control without paying their mana cost. I never understood this card. You have 4 mana, so why don't you just play your 4 mana spell? And then it looks really silly when you are empty-handed. I'm telling you that right now. So it's like at 4 mana you can play like 2 4-mana spells, I guess. I mean, effectively you played 3. Sorry, a turn 4 you can only play 1, right? Am I right? And then on turn 5 you can play 2, potentially 2 5-mana spells. So, all right, you accelerated yourself by 2 more cards, but you're down 1 card because of the Fires of Invention. I like how you said my last name. I don't even say it right. It's Marchand. It's pronounced Marchand. Ah, you know, it sounds French in my opinion. Marchand. Okay, next up, we're gonna take one from Accesta. White Plume Adventure at the White Plume Adventurer. White Plume Adventurer, a white 2 generic 3/3 Orc Cleric. When it enters the battlefield, you take the initiative. At the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, untap a creature you control. If you completed a dungeon, untap all creatures you control. So, well, we're going to start off with 2 formats. First off, in Commander, I mean, it's completely useless. All the dungeon abilities will just basically tickle your opponent. You'll, like, I don't know, deal like what, 20 damage to them, and then everyone will start wailing on you. Most of the abilities through a dungeon aren't even particularly relevant, and for that format, and it's basically just beef and power, but you need a little bit more than that in Commander. You need more synergy. You need something that will scale big time. This is just like a pretty big beat stick for its mana cost, but at the end, it's just basically a vanilla creature with a bunch of power and toughness. Now, if you take a look at Vintage. It's not even the best deck in the universe, because there are even more powerful decks than that. Because, like, again, at the end of the day, it's just a lot of power. But can you win on turn 2? Can you win on turn 3? The answer is absolutely not. So if you're going to take this all-out aggressive route, you're still going to be beaten by the combo decks. Not interactive enough. Very uninteractive card. Like, what are the things in the... It's like, you get a land. Next, you can create... What are the abilities? Remember, one door is you get a land, not interactive. Next one, you can like deal 5 damage, I think, to somebody, also not interactive. And another one is put +2/+2. It's just a massive creature for 3 mana. Next up, we'll take a look at... Oh, I think that was a free one. We're gonna go back to the super chats. Why not Maelstrom Wanderer? Maelstrom Wanderer. This is 8 mana! What are you nuts? Okay, 8 mana for a 7/5. Creatures control have haste, Cascade, and Cascade. What are you gonna get? What are you gonna get after that? I mean, it's a complete roll of the dice. Is it just like a bunch of these creatures that cascade? Like, that's not good enough. Also, there is no reliable chance you are still alive when you play this thing for 8 mana. Sure, like some cards scale very well when you get when you get that mana, but I mean it's just a gamble whether you get anything at all. And then what are you gonna do? You're just gonna hit someone for a good chunk of damage, but it's not even over yet. It's not over. Okay, next up. Ooh, Library of Alexandria. Unban it. This is one of the biggest traps in all of Magic the Gathering. Like, what are you going to do on turn 1? People always say, well, it's broken on turn 1. You know, you can always draw a card. And then what? What, discard to hand size? Okay, turn 1, I draw my 8th card. Play Library of Alexandria. I'm not going to play Soul Ring or anything. Tap, draw a card. Okay, I have 8 cards. You better have a 0 mana card in your hand to make any use of that. And also, it's completely tempo backbreaking. You're literally basically doing nothing on your turn 1. Not developing the board. You're not playing a Mana Dork. You're not playing your Soul Ring. So this card, I think, is a huge tempo disadvantage. If you want to keep using it every turn, you're basically down a mana every single turn. We'll fight for that extra mana with Mana Crypt and Soul Ring and our Mana Dorks. And instead, we're going to be going down on mana. That is a losing strategy. There's so much card draw in this game that I don't even think you have to be looking for it in the Library of Alexandria. They can most definitely take this thing off the ban list tomorrow. All formats. Okay, next up. Windfall. I mean, it's still restricted in Vintage. Vintage is a very funny format. Windfall. 3-mana sorcery. Each player discards their hand, then draws cards equal to the number of cards a player discarded this way. How do you know this is not going to help your opponent? Everyone's discarding their cards. Who doesn't utilize their graveyard? Yeah, I mean, sure, you're going to be going about your strategy, your plan. I'm sure you want to draw, discard and draw cards, but you're just helping them as well. You have no idea what they have in their hand. They could be. If I know I'm up against a Windfall player, you better believe I'm going to be keeping all my lands in hand. I want you to Windfall. I want you to replace all that stuff. Anyway, that's why Windfall is a completely useless strategy. Yeah, exactly. I can't tell you how many times I've Windfall and my opponent won. Sometimes I Windfall knowing I can't win so I can help somebody else. You have no ability to guarantee that the Windfall is going to help you more than your opponents. It's a complete gamble. And in my game, when I play Magic the Gathering, I don't gamble. Next super chat, we got Algot with Witness Protection. Oh, outside of this being like one of the worst removal spells ever, we literally have a blue mana enchant creature. Enchanted creature loses all abilities and is a green and white citizen creature with base power and toughness 1/1 named Legitimate Business Person. Have we ever heard of Pongify? Have we heard of Frogify? Sorry, not Frogify. Pongify Rapid Hybridization. There's a lot of blue, like, you know, I understand blue is hurting on removal, but we don't have to be looking for Witness Protection. This is literally sorcery speed nonsense. On top of that, we barely even removed the creature. We gave them a human being named named a 1/1 Legitimate Business Person. And it only affects one creature. I prefer to play Curse of the Swine over this, even if I buff up their creatures to 2/2s. Next up, Faithless Looting from Hamad. Faithless Looting, red sorcery. Oh, hold on. It's a red sorcery. Draw 2 cards, discard 2 cards. I'll tell you what I have to say about this card. It's absolutely worthless. It's card disadvantage, so you're spending a card just to draw 2 and discard 2, so you're already down cards. Flashback is a huge tempo backbreaking swing. You're going to spend, basically this is worth about 1 mana, don't get me wrong, but 3 mana it's absolutely not worth it. So you're more likely to be tempoing yourself out at that point. What else do I have to say about this card? Drawing cards, you have to discard 2 cards, you're not allowed to keep them. No, not a huge fan of the Faithless Looting. Not to mention, like, if you are playing a graveyard-oriented deck, they're very easy to hate out. Like, we have all the tools between, like, Grafdigger's Cage, Rest in Peace, Surgical Extraction. You cannot reliably play a graveyard-based deck in the year 2024 and get away with it. So, starting off with a Faithless Looting deck is already the start to failure. Next up, we have a super chat coming from Kagan. Sorry, yeah, I'll go with you, Kagan. The One Ring! No, the One Ring is god-awful. The One Ring, 4-mana legendary artifact. Now, it is indestructible. When it enters the battlefield and you cast, you gain protection from everything until your next turn. Well, you're going to need it because you literally did nothing this turn. At the beginning of your upkeep, you lose 1 life for each burden counter on the One Ring. Tap, put a burden counter on the One Ring. Then draw a card for each burden counter on the One Ring. This card is so bad in Commander because you're only allowed to play 1 card. You can't even Legend Rule it out of the way. So before you know it, you've actually died. You've actually literally died to your own One Ring. And you can't even destroy it even if you wanted to. So it's basically an indestructible time bomb. Now, let's say you just tap it. Let's say you're not even too greedy. You spend 4 mana to tap it to draw 1 card. What kind of value was that? What, have you lost your mind? 4 mana for 1 card. But the problem, and so there's no good way to balance this. You either draw more cards with the risk of losing more life, or you basically don't get sufficient value for 4 mana. Could say, like, maybe spending 4 mana to draw 3 cards, not bad, but really not the greatest thing either. If you know what's good for you, don't play the One Ring. Okay, next up. Got Cooked Banana, Moxed Jet. Let me tell you, Mox Jet is literally strictly worse basic swamp, okay? You heard of Chalice of the Void, you heard of Null Rod. Well, that's completely undermined by those cards completely undermine Mox Jet. And when you've emptied your hand, like, is it any better? You want the basic lands. They're not affected by anything. No hate cards whatsoever. Your opponent plays Powder Keg on 0, Ratchet Bomb on 0. What are you gonna do? Engineered Explosives on 0. There's a lot of ways to wipe these things out, but the basic lands, they are the purest in the game. And you gotta tell me, you pound for pound, what is the difference between basic Swamp and Mox Jet? Nothing! Absolutely nothing. I once played a little bit of Vintage, and I realized, wow, basic islands are actually just completely broken. They're way better than Mox Sapphire in that format. So anyway, I think these are completely overrated. We can take them off the ban list at any moment. Next up, we're going to take a look at, let's take this Steve Cooper one. This is Ancestral Recall and Black Lotus. And also donate to 3 people. Okay, let's start off with, oh, you want both? You only get one. Ancestral Recall. You know the rules. Okay, maybe for you I'll do both. Okay, we'll start off with Ancestral Recall. It's a blue instant. Target player draws 3 cards. You're not actually drawing 3 cards. You're only drawing actually 2 cards. Understand? You gotta understand that correctly. You spent a card to get 3 cards, so you've only netted 2 cards. Not nearly as good as you think it is. There's a lot of cards that draw 3 cards out there. And there's a lot of cards that can scale better than that. Top of that, in the formats where you can play or could play Ancestral Recall, it's either banned or restricted. There's no point in playing a card that's been reduced to that level. You want to be playing cards that are 4x. What else do I have to say about Ancestral Recall? I love drawing my cards, but in this, it's also very poorly positioned in the Shieldred metagame. So you think Ancestral Recall is good, but then all of a sudden you're up against Shieldred the Apocalypse, and you realize, do you know what? It's not actually 1 blue, draw 3. It's 1 blue, draw 3, and actually lose 6 life. And in that case, you know what? I think it's pushed a little bit out of the format. It's actually, where I wouldn't say it's pushed out of the format, the card is fine. 1 blue, draw net 2. I can live in that world, but it's actually, it's been balanced by the Shieldred the Apocalypse. Oh, and you want to say Black Lotus. Oh man, can I write an essay about Black Lotus? This is literally card disadvantage. Let's say you play Black Lotus Swamp, you play Shieldred the Apocalypse, then somebody Swords to Plowshares it. Then what? You're literally down 2 cards. Do you know what is a great example of the power level of Black Lotus and how it's fair? It's Jeweled Lotus in Commander. Is Jeweled Lotus taking over the game? Absolutely not. Of course it would not. And you look at the commanders that are 3 colors, 4 colors that are 3 or 4 mana. It's completely useless. And also Black Lotus would do the same. You cannot cast those cards off of your Black Lotus, or the mana is really clunky. So it's a 2-for-1 enabler. You ask the Vintage players. Sometimes Black Lotus is not the pick. You have a choice between, like, sometimes Soul Ring is just strictly better. That is mana that you can use every single turn for the rest of the game. But this is a one-shot, and if you blow it, if it doesn't work, you're just down cards. And I think Black Lotus, easily, completely overrated in 2024. Okay, now 3 donations. We're going to give one to Fabricio Urza. Lord High Artificer. Okay, Urza, blue 2 generic for a 1/4. When Urza High Lord Artificer enters the battlefield, create a 0/0 colorless construct artifact creature token with this creature gets +1/+1 for each artifact you control, tap an untapped artifact. So basically, it's some form of Tolarian Academy. Pay 5, shuffle your library, then exile the top card until end of turn. You may play that card without paying its mana cost. Now, I sort of like this card because it's sort of like 3 mana, because you do get the construct you can immediately tap for blue, but the ability is useless. I mean, shuffle your library and exile the top card of your library until end of turn you may play that card. Well, what if you hit a land? So, like, if you hit a land, bad. If you hit, like, a very situational instant or sorcery, like a counter spell, also bad. what else? Because, like, you have to nail it in, like, in the moment. And, like, let's say you really need a counterspell for a situation. You're really spinning the wheels here. And you have to hope to get really, really lucky. So it's the second half of the ability is basically stone cold useless. Not to mention the construct is super vulnerable to dress down, to everything that was going to blow up all the artifacts is also similarly, like ratchet bomb, powder keg, engineered explosives on 0. Remember, this is a 0 mana card, very, very weak to sweepers, or weak to a lot of interactions, so it's not quite reliable. Anyway, the card is just complete garbage. Not to mention, if you want to use this as your commander, you're stuck in mono blue. There is no strong CDH decks in mono colors, or it's very, very rare. You always need like 2 or 3 colors to make it really work. Okay, next up, we'll take one from the Hand of Death, Altar of the Brood. This is like a super janky combo card. Altar of the Brood, 1 mana artifact. Whenever another permanent enters the battlefield under your control, each opponent puts the top card of his or her library into his or her graveyard. I've always hated these types of cards. You think you're gonna mill them out, when really, I mean, if they're playing a singular Eldrazi that shuffles everything back in their deck, you're screwed. If they're playing, what is it, Guy's Blessing, you're also screwed. Well, who doesn't use their graveyard for something? You're enabling their flashback spells. You're enabling their threshold, their delirium. I think this is a completely insane strategy. There's only one option. You have to get them in one shot, but to do that, you always need to assemble a combo of like 4 or more cards on the battlefield. Well, good luck getting that off. And if you have Altar of the Brood on the battlefield first, I mean, people are going to see it coming. Okay, next up, we've got Amazing Crack Monkey with the Treasure Cruise. See, it's like if you fill up their graveyard, you're enabling the Treasure Cruise. So how are you going to fill up your graveyard, huh? Especially in, if you look at the commander metagame, you don't have anything to reliably fill up your graveyard. You got a blue 7 generic sorcery, it's got delve, draw 3 cards, but you still need that 7 mana. And also the 3 cards doesn't scale very well against 4 players. The amount of time that you are spending to simply draw 3 cards in a commander game, it just isn't worth it. This is like incremental advantage that you can probably leverage in a one-on-one game, but in commander, I mean, this is stone cold useless. It's like you look at the people with the Consecrated Sphinx who draw like 8 or 10 cards. Who cares? They don't care. You draw 3 cards, it's pathetic compared to what the Consecrated Sphinx can do if left completely untouched. So I don't think we're thinking big enough. This is really small peanuts in Commander. And one more freebie. Oh, this is an easy one. Will Anderson, Ancient Tomb. You're basically going to put yourself into your own tomb with Ancient Tomb. Land, tap, add 2 colorless. Ancient Tomb deals 2 damage to you. This is for people who like to basically punch themselves in the face. I don't have much to say except it's going to slowly deal your death. Now, these days in Commander, you got to be more mid-rangey. The games go long. No one can just combo off. So as the games scale, use your Ancient Tomb on turn, say, like turn 2, turn 3, turn 4, turn 5. If you've already dealt 8 damage, you're like reduced your life total by 25%. That is going to bite you in the end, in combination with how much damage you're taking from your mana crypt. I've lost so many times to my own mana crypt. I cannot believe it. I would not be, I don't even want to think how much more faster I would have died if I owned an Ancient Tomb. I don't have an Ancient Tomb in my commander deck yet. Don't have it, but I die enough to my own mana crypt, and Ancient's Tomb will just kill me like 2 times faster. Doesn't even produce color mana. Exactly, Adamant. It doesn't even produce color mana. Oh, this is an absolute abomination. Louis Turan, Vexing Devil. I said we have to talk. You have to talk about good cards on this list, not bad cards. Bad cards are already bad. The show is about bad cards here. Okay, let's take a look at another super chat from Logan. The Underworld Breach. So if you're in your Altar of the Brood metagame, this might look good, but in actuality, it's going to be too difficult for you to be building a graveyard with your Underworld Breach. Not to mention, I mean, you're still super stone cold vulnerable to any other sort of, like, any sort of graveyard hate that you would get in one-on-one games. Underworld Breach basically sees no play because the graveyard hate is way too strong. By the way, it is a 2-mana enchantment. Each non-land card in your graveyard has escape. The escape cost is equal to the card's mana cost plus exiling 3 cards. How far are you going to get with this thing? How far are you going to get? You have to exile your own graveyard to be able to use your graveyard. This card literally eats itself up. The resources up to use them. It doesn't scale very well. You cannot go infinite off of this unless you have like a lot of different moving parts on the battlefield to keep feeding that graveyard. At the beginning, and then at the beginning of your end step, you have to sacrifice your Underworld Breach. Well, that's great. So it's like, if you do not make use of this, the turn that it comes into play, then it's basically stone cold useless. I know there's people out there that try to play this to, like, I don't know, draw 2 or 3 cards off of their Mishra's Baubles, but that's like just a weird expressive iteration. What are they doing? And it's also just a bunch of random cards on top of that. Anyway, Underworld Breach, super overrated, super easy to interact with. Yeah, not worth it. You can even counter, no, you can't counter anything. You can counter itself, but that's not a really good argument, in my opinion. All right. So you love these bad cards. Have I convinced you not to buy them? Well, let me convince you to buy at least something from FusionGamingOnline.com. Deal of the week, save 15% off. Oh, I don't think this is not the deal of the week, or still. Is it still the deal of the week? Deal of the week, 15% off Thunder Junction singles and sealed product. Get it while it's hot. Also, I love the Thunder Junction singles. There's a lot of neat spree cards out there to upgrade your Pioneer, Commander, and Legacy decks. Also, keep an eye out for Modern Horizons 3. As spoilers get released, you want to pre-order those cards, you can support the channel by pre-ordering from FusionGamingOnline.com. Don't forget to use coupon code Nikachu at checkout for 5% off all your purchases. We're also going to thank Mana Traders, the premier place to rent Magic cards online. Your ability to play any format, anytime you want, the way you want to play it. Hold on, I have a new coupon code. Let me add the new coupon. We have a new coupon code OKM. I think it's OKM. Better not be 0. Is it 0? I don't think so. I think it's OKM. Okay, Nikachu _ OKM for 10% off your first 2 months by renting cards on Magic Online. The digital form, the digital way to play. Okay, let's get back to silly nonsense here. I bought an Underworld Breach yesterday. Enjoy it. Be careful, with great power comes great backfire. Okay, Basalt Monolith from Turkey the Squirrel. Basalt Monolith, 3-mana artifact. It doesn't untap during your untap step. Do I have to say any more? Tap, add 3 mana. Better make you good use of it because it doesn't even untap itself. What kind of mana dork is that? You compare this to Soul Ring. Soul Ring is 1 mana, adds 2. You can keep doing that every single turn. This is 3 mana, add like 1 more, but that's it. And I gotta pay another 3 to get your 3. You literally net nothing with this card. You net exactly 0. You pay for as much as you get out of this card. It's almost like a storage card. You know those storage lands, those storage artifacts? That's basically what it is. It's just a glorified storage card. You spent 3 mana to store it, and you gotta spend another 3 mana to get it back. Anyway, Stone Cold terrible. Next up, we've got Bacon Catbug's Mental Misstep. Mental Misstep. For a Phyrexian mana, it's an instant counter target spell with converted mana cost 1. One of the least flexible counter spells in the entire game. Yeah, your opponent plays Consecrated Sphinx, and you stare down at your Mental Misstep, and you start regretting your life. Your opponent plays Farewell, and they're staring at you, right? The Farewell player, you have the islands. You might even be tapped out because you could have Force Negation, Force of Will. You could have had Daze, you could have Thwart, you could have Foil. You have Mental Misstep in your hand. This hits nothing important in the game. You all know it. Some of you might have even taken the Mental Misstep out because you realize how bad this card is. It just counters a spell with convert mana cost 1. Not even 1 or less. Just 1. 1 part of the mana value. The least relevant of all mana values. look, little cards you're even mentioning, like Lion's Eye Diamond, can't counter that. Can't counter the Liliana of the Veil, not the Primeval Titan. Can't counter Mikaeus the Unhallowed. You know, you basically, what is the format basically? It's like a huge chunk of the game, and none of it the important stuff. It's like, what are you gonna do? Mental misstep somebody's Soul Ring? Feels like more of a waste of a card to inconvenience somebody else. If you ask, am I right? I'm not wrong. Yeah, you can mental misstep your mental misstep. It's like, so it's such one of the weirdest cards to design. Basically, was made to destroy itself. Okay, next up, we've got, let's take one. Let's go with this Mikaeus one. You've been mentioning it. Dinglebags, Mikaeus the Unhallowed. Well, outside of being mono black and like 6 mana, what's the selling point? Okay, it's got Intimidate. Whenever a human deals damage to you, destroy it. How often are you up against the human deck? Other non-human creatures you control get +1/+1 and have Undying. I think this is like a really expensive hate card for humans. Not to mention there are like better ways to hate on the human decks. You could play Plague Engineer for 3 mana. That thing has Death Touch. You can play, I mean, just any sweeper I think is fine. Not to mention, the humans have to deal damage to you. This is a triggered ability. You could be dead by the time this thing triggers. You consider that? Yeah, I don't think anything was considered here. I think this card is really bad versus the human deck. You still have the chance of dying, and I mean, they'll just attack you when they know they can kill you in one shot. Next up, we do have the super chat from Max Tyler, the Arena of the Ancients. Arena of the Ancients. This is a 3-mana legendary creatures don't untap during their controller's untap steps. And when Arena of the Ancients enters the battlefield, tap all legendary creatures. This sounds like self-sabotage. Literally the best cards in the game are your legendary creatures. You play this in Commander, you're basically screwing yourself. How could anyone play this with a straight face? Also, if you play this in, for example, in competitive formats, there may not even be enough legendary creatures to tap in the first place. It's like a really awkward sideboard card. Yeah, I really have nothing much to say about it. It's like, it goes against the reason of playing your deck in your format. Or maybe you could play this in, what's it called, that Sorin deck? You could play it in an Eminence deck? You might have something going on here. Your commander sits in the command zone. It's completely unaffected by this damn thing. But outside of that, so that's a very, very narrow utility in general. Like, basically nobody can play this card because it's just basically it's just gonna sabotage yourself. Next up, we've got Asteroid Yeti with Urza Saga. So you can't even use this as your turn 1 land drop. Okay, so let's say Chapter 1, add a mana. Chapter 2, you have the ability to pay 2, tap, make a construct. Chapter 3, switch your library for a 0/1 mana card, put on the battlefield, then shuffle. So if you have a 1-lander, this card really sucks. Because by turn 2, you have a land in play, but you can't even make any constructs. So that's bad. Second off, again, the constructs are some of the weakest cards in the game that die to dress down, engineered explosives, null rod, powder keg. Everyone's got these cards, people. You're not going to scale them away. And on top of that, you ever heard that you can die to Blood Moon? Like, dies to Blood Moon, dies to Spreading Seas, Tide Shaper. If you remove this card's abilities and turn it into a different land, poof, it's gone. You just don't have a land at all. So you're like risking yourself being blown away. You're risking a huge blowout to those archetypes. Magus of the Moon is also in a very similar fashion. When you have to play, in one-on-one Magic, people side out their Urza Sagas versus the Tide Shaper Spreading Seas decks. They side out their Urza Sagas when the opponent is playing with Blood Moon. It's just not worth it. It's just not worth getting nailed by this interaction. So it needs to be played by turn 2. It's colorless mana, which means you have to have a very specific type of deck that would want to play this. If you stretch it to 3 or 4 colors, like, absolutely forget about it. Colorless mana might as well be just a completely dead draw. Might as well look like a waste. And on top of that, if you need the mana, well, screw you, because you have to sacrifice it in 3 turns. So you get mana literally for basically 2.5 turns. You can float it on chapter 3, and then that's it. Poof, it's absolutely gone. So yeah, I am 2 thumbs down on Urza Saga. Next up, we've got Pacers Fan Forever with the Deathrite Shaman. You look at, okay, so this card is legal in Pioneer. And how much play does it see? It sees absolutely nothing. 0 play. Not a single deck plays Deathrite Shaman. If there is no graveyard, there's no Deathrite Shaman. It's a green, black, 1/2, tap, exile target land card from a graveyard, add 1 mana of any color. Black, tap, exile target instant or sorcery card from a graveyard, each opponent loses 2 life. Pay green, tap, exile target creature card from a graveyard, you gain 2 life. Not to mention, you can interact with your own graveyard in response to Deathrite Shaman. This isn't a normal mana dork. See, when you tap Birds of Paradise, you get the mana. When you activate Deathrite Shaman, you have to target a land. Then you have to wait for it to resolve. Well, what if I use my own graveyard and exile it in response? What if I use a Relic of Progenitus, target myself, and remove my land? Then you don't get the mana. It is a complete waste of your turn. So a Deathrite Shaman, very, very awkward card, and definitely doesn't see play when there is no graveyard available. Huge risk. Do not play Deathrite Shaman. Next we got Bryce with Oko, Thief of Crowns. Oko, 3 mana, 4 loyalty. +2, create a food token. This is like really, this is incredibly underwhelming. +1, target artifact or creature loses all abilities and becomes a green elk creature with base power and toughness 3/3. But you didn't get rid of the creature. So, I mean, it's a target artifact or creature, so when you try to attack your opponent's creatures, they still have the creature on the battlefield. They can still attack Oko. This is a plan that's not going to last forever. And then -5, exchange target artifact or creature you control and target creature an opponent controls with power 3 or less. So you can't even grab anything good. It's like, okay, I invented this monster. I gave you a 3/3. Now I'm going to swap something of mine for yours. What kind of exchange is that? I want to swap for a Consecrated Sphinx. I want to take your Eldrazi away. Because those things are going to obliterate me. They're going to attack way over this 3/3. So for that, Oko, Thief of Crowns, huge loser around here. Don't look at Oko. Algot with the Discord Lord of... What does that mean? Lord of Disharmony? Is this like a custom card? Oh, this thing. Well, biggest problem is not even a legal card. It's a 3/5 Chimera flying. At the beginning of your end step, choose a random non-land magic card name. Until your next end step, you may cast a copy of a spell with that name and mana of any type, which type can be spent to cast it. If you cast a spell this way, copy this ability. If Discord is on the battlefield, what the hell does that mean? I'll tell you what your biggest problem is, rule zeroing this thing into the game. It's not a legal card. Oh, hey, everyone. Oh, it's called Discord itself. I didn't realize. Someone should alter this with the Discord logo on it. So your biggest problem is getting this thing even into the game. Try to convince your friends, oh yeah, I want this card that I can just name anything and poof, it's there. Oh, what fun it is to making sense. It's never gonna happen. Yeah, no Discord chat on the battlefield. Philip Lundgren with Liliana the Veil. We got a 3 mana, 3 Liliana. Liliana +1, each player discards a card. You're also discarding a card. I don't see where the advantage is there. And you can never tell if they're discarding something bad. If they it's like you tick up, you discard Thoughtseize, they discard a land. Like, well, that is a huge oof, in my opinion. Huge oof. -2, target player sacrifices a creature. But then after they sack the creature, they just attack Liliana. It's not like you're defending this thing very well. That was always the biggest problem with Liliana. It's like 3 mana. It's not even a direct removal spell. Like, for 2 mana, you can kill exactly what you want on the battlefield. For 3 mana, you give them the choice to sacrifice what they want, they're never going to sacrifice the big thing that you want them to sacrifice. They're going to sacrifice the little crappy token. You look at the token players, or anyone who has like a mass huge battlefield. What do you think Farewell is good for? Because it blows everything up. Liliana can't even close to that power level. Now it's got it has a decent -6, but unfortunately it will never live long enough in order to get that far. Next up, I think that was a freebie. Go with Kagan with Underground Sea or any other old dual lands. Underground Sea has the same problem as all the other dual lands. So the dual lands, they all have one unanimous problem. There's a million hate cards for them, whether it be Wasteland, Blood Moon, Dust Bowl, Magus of the Moon. Like that is the cost to be playing with non-basic lands. So sure, it does fix your mana. Not that much better. You know, it's hilarious. People playing, like, you can fetch out some like really decent lands. That the soul really is the fetch lands. So you can like fetch out, what's it called? I can't remember what the farmland? Is it called farmland? Irrigated farmland. This is literally tundra for like millions of people, and it cost 8 cents. 8 cents. You want to pay 8 cents for your dual land, or you want to pay $750? It's wild to me. Not to mention, this card can't cycle. This card can. So if you have it in your hand as a random top deck, you can always exchange it for a new card. This card doesn't even exchange for anything. It's like it is basically a really vanilla dual land. Most other dual lands, they gain you life. They can cycle. What else can they do? They can cycle for 3 mana. Some lands out there, they tap for 3 mana. This is only 2 mana. Pathetic. They also have a white border version, which is worse. Yeah, they're worse than the black border version. You got that right. All right, next up, let's take a look at... hasn't got one yet. Okay, Leon. Lion's Eye Diamond. This is just strictly worse Black Lotus. 0 mana, sacrifice Lion's Eye Diamond, discard your hand, add 3 mana of any one color to your mana pool, activate this ability only anytime you could cast an instant. So the only advantage, so first off, you can't ramp into anything with this card. The only thing you can ramp into, it's effectively a 0 mana, 1 with nothing. How good is 1 with nothing in the game? How many of you are playing 1 with nothing? Anybody? Anybody? No, nobody's playing with 1 with nothing. Nobody at all. So why are we saying Lion's Eye Diamond is any good? So some people might say, well, you can cast the cards in your graveyard. You have to dump your hand. Okay, you cast 1 card, then what? What happened to the other cards in your hand? You just dumped your mana base into the graveyard. Not to mention the rest of it can be interacted with graveyard removal. I think like your graveyard is more sensitive than the cards in your hand. I want to keep those cards in my hand. I don't want to put them in the. I don't want to put them in the graveyard. Too high of a risk for a Lion's Eye Diamond. So it's like a really weird Black Lotus. Black Lotus is fair enough as it is. We don't need Lion's Eye Diamond. I guess it's like a really crappy way to cast your commander, isn't it? You discard your hand, you add 3 mana, and then you can cast it from your command zone. Good job. Was it worth it? Was it worth it? Also a $450 card. Was it worth it to ramp out your commander, and then it died, and it can join your Lion's Eye Diamond and the rest of your hand in the graveyard? We've got... It is a strictly better 1 with nothing. Yeah. Strictly better 1 with nothing. Costs nothing and actually nets you mana in comparison. It's very funny. You're not wrong. Next up, Faceless Fan Forever with Ragavan. Ragavan, very misunderstood card. Ragavan, red mana 2/1 Monkey Pirate. When it deals combat damage to a player, you create a treasure token. Not bad. But then you may exile the top card of target player's library. Until end of turn, you may cast that card. So there's 2 problems with this ability. First off, you may hit a complete brick. You're not allowed to play the lands. I've said you could play the card, great, because taking their lands would be insane. But because you have to actually literally cast your cards with probably your treasures, which means you're like losing the resource that you just created, huge disadvantage. Not to mention, you're not going to play any like really good cards on the earlier turns of the game, because you don't have enough mana to cast the good stuff. And if you do have enough mana to cast the good stuff, you're probably going to need to accumulate enough treasures in order to do that. Which means you've been smacking your opponent for this 2 damage the entire game. Like, when do you get the payoff for this? It's awful. Also, you can dash it in for 2 mana, which also makes it that much harder for you to actually cast any of your opponent's spells. But my biggest gripe is the fact that you're not even guaranteed to cast anything. It's a complete gamble whether you whether you actually get to get a castable card for you to play to get on your side of the battlefield or not. All for like a whole 2 damage. It's not even that big of a beat stick. Top of that, it's legendary. You know, you want multiples of your early drops on the battlefield, not one. You want to be attacking your opponents at multiple angles, but you can't even do that with Ragavan. Very poorly designed card. It does get rid of their good cards, though, no? Well, that's not... I don't think that's a strategic benefit, Ashian. You know, it doesn't have any strategic benefit, but it will make them angry. I'll give you this. If they surveilled it to the top, it was their fault to do that when a Ragavan was on the battlefield. It was completely their fault. Tony with Shieldred the Apocalypse. Shieldred the Apocalypse, the black 2 generic 4/5 Phyrexian Praetor. Whenever you draw a card, you gain that much life. Whenever an opponent draws a card, they lose 2. How long do you think people are gonna like lose life before they start losing their minds? They're gonna wail on this thing like crazy. You know, the key to winning in Commander is you need to be sly. Like, you don't want to look like the threat at the table. You need to be quiet. You can't be putting out bombs like this, because the cards like this, unfortunately, just gain everybody's attention on you, and then it's all over. The problem is these cards can't scale well. You need some card that like looks mundane while it's on the battlefield, and then when you play the second card that synergizes with it, they will not see it coming, and then they're completely screwed. Shieldred is basically a 1 mana. It's just a bit too strong to be that effective. Every format is warped around this card to the point where it doesn't do anything. Every format that plays Shieldred the Apocalypse, everyone has an answer for it. Even I play with things like Witness Protection and Eaten by Piranhas and Pioneer to deal with this damn thing, and then they don't get any value. I mean, it has no element of surprise. The surprise effect is completely gone. And of course, I mean, it's just a creature. It just dies to any removal spells. Not Doomblade, though, right? Swords to Plowshares. That's what it would kill it. Will of Darkness. This is a show about good MTG cards, not bad MTG cards. We need to talk about good MTG cards, not the bad ones. You show me all the, you just tell me all the decks that play Master of the Pearl Trident. There's literally one deck that can play that card. Literally one. The Master of the Pearl Trident is like the least. This is not a very flexible card. Basically, when you play Master of the Pearl Trident, you're literally just building yourself one deck, and the deck builds itself. You look at the history of that deck. You tell me if it's any good. All right, next up, we've got, take a look at Kagan. You ranked Search for Azcanta as an S. The biggest problem with Search for Azcanta is too damn slow. So, I mean, if you can rule 0 with all your friends that no one's going to do anything by turn 7, yeah, sure, it can be pretty good. But objectively, I mean, you're just going to be dead by the time it really starts getting online. It's an enchantment for 2 mana, and at the beginning of your upkeep, you look at the top card of your library, you may put it into your graveyard. Then if you have 7 or more cards in your graveyard, you may transform Search for Azcanta. God, how long is this going to be? Are you going to wait 7 turns to flip this thing? And then on top of that, this is like a big waste of mana. It taps for a blue, which is fine, I would take it. Pay 3, tap, look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal a non-creature, non-land card from among them and put them into your hand. Put the rest of them on the bottom of your library in any order. So you really need to slow the game down. This used to be like a pretty good constructed control card back when, you know, the game used to go like 15 turns. But now it doesn't go like that at all. On top of that, like, I don't know if you can afford to be durdling around like that in Commander. Next up, we're going to take a look at Mercarcher, Earthcraft. I don't understand why Earthcraft is banned in Legacy. This is the stupidest thing of all time. It's a green 1 generic enchantment. Tap an untapped creature you control. Untap target basic land. Some people like say, oh, this is good in Elves. You tapped your mana dork, which is a mana resource, to untap another mana dork, or it's like another source of mana. You telling me how the math checks out on? Like, the math doesn't check, in my opinion. And like, you could say, I think some people say that there's combos with Squirrel Nest. What is the difference between that and all the other combos? But here's the thing, like, not only are you weak to enchantment destruction, you're also just weak to land destruction in that combo. Who doesn't have Strip Mine in their deck? You're gonna Strip Mine the damn Squirrel Nest land, and then you're screwed. Then you got 2 for 1. Anyway, Earthcraft, I think, is an underwhelming card. I don't even know why it's on the ban list for some ban lists. Maybe we gotta look up Commander lists to see how many, like, tier 1 CEDH decks play the Earthcraft. You should do this exact live stream, but backwards. Oh, you mean like we did that one before? This is the other way. We are doing it backwards. Look, a few weeks ago, we did the other one. Next up, we've got Kagan with Null Rod, and not because it does nothing. I'll tell you what the biggest problem with this card is. All the cards that you would want to use this against, they're banned. The Moxen, Time Vault, Black Lotus, like all the really good cards that this card was basically made for, designed for, they banned them all. So now what is it going to do? There's like just a pitiful amount of cards left. And like you play this thing, I mean, they're still gonna make use out of their treasures before this thing resolves. They can play cards at instant speed. And on top of that, if you play this card, you yourself will screw your own Soul Ring, your own mana crypts. So I think that is a very big problem. That's gonna make that's gonna make deck design on your part like far more harder than it's going to screw other people. I mean, and you only have 1 Null Rod in Commander. You're just basically like, well, where's my Null Rod here? Looking at everyone else's artifacts. Everyone's having fun. Everyone's casting spells. You're playing 1 land at a time. And you're just thinking to yourself, damn, they're so lucky I don't have my Null Rod. I mean, really? It was foolish to go that route. It was foolish. Don't play your Null Rod. Play the Mana Rocks. Okay, next up, we're going to take a card from... Living End. Lewis. Now, I know why this is suggested. Now, it's not... If you take it at face value, this card is already just terrible. Look. Suspend for 4 mana. Suspend 3 on top of that. It'll be like for forever until this thing actually gets pulled off. Each player exiles all creature cards from their graveyard and sacrifices all creatures they control. Then puts all cards... then puts all cards exiled this way onto the battlefield. So you do a switcheroo of everything. Now you're supposed to break this card with Cascade cards, Violent Outburst, Shardless Agent, and so on, so that you can basically cascade directly to the Living End card, because it's the only card in your deck. Problem is there's just too many answers for this. I mean, you know, we looked at that, what is that, Archon of something. If your opponents have cards like Rule of Law effects out, useless. If you have Chalice of the Void on 0, this is useless. Your opponent has 1 counter spell, it's useless. So, I mean, there's a lot of really niche problems with Living End. On top of that, so you're weak to the Rule of Law effects, you're weak to the counter spells, you're weak to the graveyard hate. Not to mention, you might even let your opponent have a bigger board than you. I don't know how many times my opponent goes living ends, and my board is just bigger. They couldn't even beat my graveyard, so it's not even a guaranteed victory. Living end, awful. David Sampson, Dothy Voidwalker. Dothy Voidwalker, a 2-mana 3/2 Dothy Rogue with Shadow, which means you can't even block your opponent's creatures. This card can't block. What's the point of having a creature when you can't block? It might as well just be one of those cards, cannot block. How many of those cards see play at a competitive level? If a card would be put into an opponent's graveyard from anywhere, instead exile it with a void counter on it. And then you have to sacrifice this thing to play your opponent's cards. There's an easier way to do this. By the way, why are you playing your opponent's deck? You should just be playing your own. And it's easy to play around. You just kill the Dothy Voidwalker and then they play the cards that they want, and that's it. Other Dothy Voidwalkers can use your cards too. Look at that. It's like in the Dothy Voidwalker mirror, it's super awkward and clunky. Yeah, your other opponents are playing Dothy Voidwalkers. They can all play the spells. Any other comments on this? Okay, next up we have... Hold on. Okay, now we are at the point where it's Super Chats are us. Gunblade Knight with Siege Rhino. Easy. This is a very Now, this used to be good. You know, at the time, this is like, whoa, 4/5 creature, trample, and lightning helix. And now these days, we look at this like, oh, it's just 4/5 with lightning helix. I mean, the power level of this game has just completely pushed this thing completely out of the game. You look at cards like Croxa and Uro. I mean, they're infinitely better than Siege Rhino. This is basically a draft common at this point. I would not be surprised if we're going to see it in Pauper anytime soon. It is just very, very, very pushed out of the game. This is like one of those glorified standard cards that just did not stand the test of time whatsoever. You have to play, and you got to play 3 colors for this? That's terrible. It's not worth any more than 2. Lose 3, gain 3. It should have just been an Orzhov card. There's no it wasn't necessary to have green in here at all. We got Ashian with the Spell Seeker. I mean, it's just clunk. It's a 3-mana 1/1 human wizard. Enters the battlefield. You may search your library for an instant or sorcery card with mana value 2 or less. Reveal it, put it in your hand, then shuffle. There's far better tutors out there, in my opinion. I don't really have much to say about this. I mean, you spent 3 mana for this damn thing. You got it. You paid for it. In a world where we can tutor things for 1 mana, I'm not in love with the Spell Seeker. It's just basically it's a 3rd-rate tutor in a tier 0 world. We got the Wolf Muro with Rhystic Study. Everyone thinks Rhystic Study is broken until they realize your opponent could just pay the mana. And then all of a sudden, well then what? So you pay 3 mana. Whenever an opponent casts a spell, you may draw a card, unless that player pays 1. We already have, like, a lot of taxing effects that don't exactly, like, break the game. Thalia, Garden of Thraben, for example. You cannot play non-creature spells unless you pay an extra 1, which people will just do. In a world where we have an abundance of mana through Mana Ramp, Mana Dorks, Soul Ring, and so on, because that's just the world that Commander works. Paying 1 for your spell shouldn't be all that hard. And then the only way this works is people feed it. All right, this is not a card that's objectively good. This card is better when people don't want to respect it whatsoever. But if you're in the right metagame, if you're against the right strong opponents, they'll absolutely play around Rhystic Study. Of course they'll pay the 1. They don't ignore it. They'll even let you know I'm playing my creature and I'm paying the 1. And that is the right way you play around the Rhystic Study. And by the way, if they start letting you draw cards, that's... when those players start drawing cards, you are absolutely stone cold dead. That's when they know those cards are not going to help you. Yeah, also enchantment removal has gotten better. You look at Boseiju, you look at Leyline Binding, which there's like a lot of just mass removal. That Rhystic Study is a harder permanent to stick on the ground anyway. Yeah, Rhystic Study is more about annoying your opponent, but that does not make the card good. It makes it just bad. Another one from Kagan. We got Ashnod's Altar. I mean, it combos with how much? Yeah, but what's the quality of all of it? 3 mana artifact, sack a creature, add double colorless. Name me one 2-card combo with Ashnod's Altar. I'm waiting. Okay, I'm waiting. I'm gonna wait in chat. Name me 2-card. I want a 2-card combo with Ashnod's Altar. Tell me Ashnod's Altar plus this, and it just wins the game. Because that's the bar that we live in right now. That's literally the bar that's the measure we live in Magic the Gathering. Sliver Queen. Okay, we got one. Is there anything else? Sacrifice a creature. Hold on, does that work? Do you net anything? Sliver Queen. Put a 1/1 Sliver creature token. You don't actually net anything, so you actually can't win. So you get the 1, you sack it, you get 2. So you're just like making infinite creatures that go nowhere. Is there anything? No, nothing. The card's worthless. You want to have a 3-card combo? Infinite ETB. Then that's a 3-card combo then, Jess. Because what's the card that's going to give you value from those ETBs? That's a 3-card combo. It's not a 2-card combo. So yeah, Ashnod's Altar, not good enough. It's a jank combo card. Hey, well, you guys can play your jank, but it's still jank. Okay, next up, we've got Pacers Fan Forever with City of Traitors. City of Traitors, the land that has to sacrifice itself. When you play another land, sacrifice City of Traitors. I don't know. Do I have to say any more? Do you guys want a really good explanation of this? You look at legacy decks, they don't even play like more than 2. The liability of this is insane. Because the game is like, even if you like ramp something out by turn 2 for 3 mana, the game is gonna go longer than that, so you have to sacrifice your City of Traitors. And it only adds colorless mana. All of you out there, like, don't blow up my lands, don't touch my lands, don't destroy it, no land destruction. Like, you're not gonna play City of Traitors, because this is like self-sabotage over here. So anyway, City of Traitors, 2 thumbs down. Ashnod's Altar, Enduring Renewal, and Ornithopter was fun in school. Bingo. Hey, I'm not against fun. People can combo for fun all they want. Okay, next up, we've got the Starfruit Gaming. Miram Sentinel Worm. Oh, God. I'm going to get a lot of hate for this one. The Miram people are always in my comment section. Like, Nikachu, you don't understand. You don't understand the Sentinel Worm. Oh, I understand. It's a 6-mana 6/6 flying with Ward 2. La-di-da. Okay, whenever another non-token dragon enters the battlefield under your control, create a token that's a copy of it, except the token isn't legendary if that dragon is legendary. So not only are you telling me that I'm not winning the game by playing this 6-mana card, generally I have to play additional dragons on top of that? What kind of value is this? This is like a really weird, what is it, Parallel Lives? Type of card, except Parallel Lives can like get going like on turn 4, or like the enabler is a lot earlier. This enabler is really expensive, and yeah, that's just about it. This is a really clunky interaction. I don't believe in it. I don't believe in it. Okay, next up we've got YouTube Bay Phantom. Love the Undertale avatar with Scalp. Oh, Scalp Alexis. Pretty good fun and rage-inducing. Scalp Alexis. Maybe you have to tell me why this is good. It's 5 mana, 1/5 flyer. Deals combat damage to a player. That player removes the top 4 cards of their library from the game. If 2 or more of those cards have the same name, repeat this process. You gonna like hope that they have a bunch of basic lands? This card is too. This card is about. The show is about good cards on the show, not bad cards. And you will most certainly not mill them out either. Most certainly not mill them out. Okay, next up we've got Nalia with the Slick Shot Show Off. Outside of the fact that this is just a creature, okay, let's talk about it a little bit more. We got a 2 mana 1/2 flying haste. When you cast a non-creature spell, Slick Shot Show Off gets +2/+0 until end of turn. It's also got Plot, which means you can pay it for 2 mana. Sorry, play it for 2 mana, and then give it haste on the following turn, and hopefully unload a bunch of spells and make it really big. Now, let's take it back to Kiln Fiend. How good was Kiln Fiend? Well, actually, Kiln Fiend was straight up trash. Kiln Fiend. Let's go look at Kiln Fiend. Just an example. This is a better Kiln Fiend, don't get me wrong, but it's still a Kiln Fiend. At the end of the day, we are casting spells in order to pump this thing up, in order to kill our opponents. But the ultimate price is that it is a very weak 2 toughness creature. It dies to shock. It doesn't even pass. This card does not even pass the shock test. It cannot buff up its toughness whatsoever. What is Slick Shot defense? What is Slick Shot Show Off's defense in 2024? Right now, this card is getting annihilated in all the formats because it just cannot beat removal. Your opponent has 1 remove. Who would win? Slick Shot Show Off and 1,000,000 spells, or one shock or Seal of Fire? Dies to Doomblade. Well, it doesn't exactly die to... Oh, you're suggesting Orcish Bowmaster. It doesn't die to Orcish Bowmaster. That's literally the only thing it beats, is Orcish Bowmasters. But if that's it, it's not enough. Kagan with Chunky Drago. Is that a real card called... Oh, Gold Span Dragon. I always thought that this was like the biggest win more machine of all time. Like, it's a 5 mana 4/4 flying in haste, and when it attacks or becomes the target of a spell, you create a treasure token, and then treasures you control have tap, sack this artifact, add 2 mana of any one color. Like, this is just like a really weird mana ramper. When I get to 5 mana, it's time to win the game. It's time to win the game. And then for some people with Goldspan Dragon, it's like, I'm at 5 mana. It's time to make more mana. Like, what are you ramping towards? At some point, you have to start like actually throwing out threats that can, win the game. That is the objective of the game. Somebody needs to win. It's like, this is basically like almost like a group hug deck. You're making more mana so you can help more people at the table. But that does not necessarily make this card good. And we got John with Time Stop. Time Stop. It's a nice art, I'll give it that. We have 6 mana, instant end the turn. You want to end the turn for 6 mana? You know, I can end my turn at any time that I want for 0 mana. Now, I understand there's some strategic significance. Is there not a 4 mana version of this? Is this like a strictly worse version of that? Like, another problem I have with this type of card is it's like, it's supposed to act like a counter spell, but there are so many counter spells that can be played for way less. So, like, playing the 6 mana Time Stop to counter somebody playing their commander, well, that's like really, really weird, because you could have just spent 2 mana on that instead. You lose Storm once, then start sideboarding this into every deck. Well, I think against the Storm deck, you're never going to be able to time... You can't Time Stop that because they'll Storm off by turn 3. Like, most Storm decks, they got you covered by... they've got you covered by turn, like at least by turn 4. So by the time you have time stop available, well, you're not in the game anymore. You can goldfish to this time stop all you want. Okay, Kagan is like, okay, Commander's Plate. In colorless. It's a 1-mana equipment. Equipped creature gets +3/+3 and has protection from each color that's not in your commander's color identity. Equip commander for 3. Equip other creatures for 5. This is like one of those this is like real life where they're like, all right, you can buy this product, but then if you want to get to the real juice, if you want the real thing, you actually have to pay more. There's like, it's like when I download an app and they say contains, like, what is it called? Contains inside downloadable stuff. I can't remember what the term for that is though. Contains download, like, paid content or some of that effect. It's exactly what the commander plate is. You can play it for 1 mana, then you play your commander. So it says, equipped creature has +3/+3 and has protection from each color that's not in your commander's color identity. Well, what about the turn that you play your commander? Are you gonna have the 3 mana up for that thing? Absolutely not. You're not gonna have 3 mana for this thing. You have to wait until next turn. At that point, you're ruined. Yeah, in-app purchases. That's what I'm like. Downloadable content. Exactly. Equipped creature still dies to Wrath of God. And Farewell. In fact, Farewell will blow this thing up too. Okay, who did not get a card? Okay, let's get some people who didn't get a card. I have some time. For Ginka, Exquisite Blood. Aside from the fact that it's 5 mana, whenever an opponent loses life, you gain that much life. It's okay. It's okay. But it's not in the range of good around here. You know, like, you're not going to win the game with life gain. Like, you can have, your life total can be 1 billion, and your opponent is still going to kill you with commander damage, am I right? So, like, life, you know, life, it's not the be-all, end-all. In fact, it's usually, like, the noob strategy to get, like, hey, I'm at 80 life. How could I lose from here? But in fact, people can do infinite damage, and you still die anyway. And this isn't infinite life. This is as much life as people have to lose. So you're gonna cap your threshold, and then when people start striking back, you're dead. It's exactly how it works. Now, if it was different, if it was you lose life that someone else get, if you gain life, you drain someone else's life, that's a completely different story. We have another super chat from Darkstar. Sure, a master. We did miss Master of the Pearl Trident. We literally did it. Here, I'll give you the super chat. I'll donate that one. It's like such a narrow card. It's a super, super, super narrow card. Not to mention it's like a 2/2 that's useless without all the other creatures. Other merfolk you control get +1/+1 and have Island Walk. And what if you have no other merfolk on the battlefield? This card is super, super sad. And that's exactly how a merfolk player feels most of the time. They have their lone merfolk, Master of the Pearl Trident, but nothing to master. No army to lead. Just lonely. All by himself over there in an empty pool of water. Bell! But I didn't get a card. Did we do Wasteland? Wasteland is brutal. You can't destroy basic lands. This thing taps for colorless. Like, at best, you are exchanging 1 for 1, so you actually don't get ahead in the game. Like, you gotta be looking, like, if you want to win in Magic the Gathering, you need to be going for 2 for 1s. This 1 for 1 is not a very good exchange, not to mention it's a huge tempo loss to your own mana base as well. So that's, and you can look at it that way in a 1-on-1 game. Now, if it's 1-on-4, it's even worse, because it's basically, you are sacrificing your resources against somebody else, you both go down, and the other 2 players that didn't have their lands blown up, they basically go up. They're at a huge tempo. I wouldn't say maybe not. They're at they're resource positive compared to the other 2. So anyway, Wasteland, rubbish card. Gotta be careful playing this card. Now, if you could somehow Wasteland and blow 2 cards up at once, that's something to do. Next up, we have another super chat. We got the Wolf Moroa with Thassa's Oracle. Thassa's Oracle, you say? See, blue 1/3 Merfolk Wizard. When Thassa's Oracle enters the battlefield, look at the top X cards of your library, where X is your devotion to blue. Put one of them on top of your library, and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. If X is greater than or equal to the greater number of cards in your library, you win the game. So a lot of people think that this is like the broken card in a lot of decks. Well, I have some news for you. There was already Laboratory Maniac. If someone who wants to combo off by removing their entire deck from the game, there are other win conditions. Thassa's Oracle just made it faster. So Thassa's Oracle is actually not your problem. It is a redundant win condition. The idea of Thassa's Oracle is, and a lot of people say, I want to win. If you're going to win, why don't you win the game faster? Well, Thassa's Oracle already does that. So there are other ways of winning the game with the Thassa's Oracle, not a particularly new card. But then by itself, it's absolute trash. Devotion equal to the number of, you're going to look at the top X cards of your library equal to its devotion. Devotion is 2. It's pathetic. And then if you ever play it on the battlefield, well, now you can't combo off because you already burned your combo card over here. So anyway, Thassa's Oracle, incredibly overrated. You shouldn't really blame Thassa's Oracle. You should blame the combo that got to Thassa's Oracle. All right, you gotta blame the combo. And next up, we've got anyone else who didn't get a card? Dragonic with the Glorybringer. I love how someone named Dragonic with a dragon avatar is mentioning Glorybringer. Stream needs more dragons. Yeah, you're right. The stream needs more dragons. We got 5 mana, 4/4 dragon. It's got flying and haste, but it all goes downhill from there because you may exert the Glorybringer as it attacks. When you do, it deals 4 damage to target non-dragon creature an opponent controls. So it doesn't blow everything up, but if it's like 4 toughness or less, it will. But then the Glorybringer gets tired. What the hell's up with that? What cards do we want to play that we get to attack our opponent? We have to take a turn off. That's like phasing. You have to think, this card is not like an exert card. This is a phasing card. When you see exert, you just think phasing. Because you can't use the card until next turn. Even worse than phasing, the card is still in the battlefield, so still vulnerable to removal spells to sweepers. Whereas if at least you phase the thing out, well, it's invincible to anything on the battlefield. So anyway, Glorybringer. Phasing was never good, and neither was Glorybringer. Kagan with Terramorphic Expanse. This is just a bad... Do we really have to go with this? We really have to do this? Land, tap, sacrifice it. Search your library for a basic land cards, not even non-basic lands. Put it onto the battlefield tapped, and then you have to shuffle your library. This is literally like this is a poor man's fetch land. I mean, you gotta do. I understand you people gotta do what you gotta do out there, but I mean, this is strictly worse fetch land than all the other fetch lands. The only advantage is you don't pay any life, but you got what you paid for. You know what they say, you got what you paid for. Goro's Vengeance. Darkstar Ashura. 2 mana. For an instant, return target legendary creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. That creature gains haste. Exile at the beginning of the next end step. Splace Hunter Arcane. This card can backfire so many different ways. They can exile the card that you target in the graveyard. You have to target like a legendary card. I've seen situations also where people will discard an Emrakul into the graveyard. The Emrakul will trigger. You try to play Goryo's Vengeance, but then they counter the Goryo's Vengeance or interact it with some way that Goryo's Vengeance goes to the graveyard, and then the Emrakul shuffles the entire graveyard into the library. So you got nailed both ways. You lost your Goryo's Vengeance, and also you lost everything that you could target in the graveyard. There's also other problems, like you reanimate a creature, but then they just tap it with Deceiver Exarch, Pestermite, Ice. So if you have any sort of tapping ability, the creature will do nothing. Sometimes you can even... Usually you're trying to reanimate something with a huge ability. If they dress down in response, well then the card like has like no utility. You might hit them for like 6 once, or hit them for a good chunk of damage, and then you gotta sacrifice the creature. But that's not worth enough these days. So Gora's Vengeance, super high risk, low reward. Hunter Strong. How about Dress Down? Ooh, just speaking of Dress Down to interact with the Gora's Vengeance. Oh, let's talk about that card as well. Let's talk down to Dress Down. Well, it's basically a glorified cycler, because you're going to pay 2 mana and you get to draw a card. Got it? Flash. When Dress Down enters the battlefield, you draw a card. Creatures lose all abilities. But here's the problem. At the beginning of the end step, sacrifice Dress Down. That's it. It's a one-shot kabooey, you know? You have to interact. It only works when you're interacting with those really niche, weird strategies like Gora's Vengeance. It's too situational. Not to mention, if your opponent just plays with a big chunky creature, it's sort of stone cold useless. So it's like it's really good in really narrow situations. So it's like a sideboard card, but generally speaking, it's like, this is not Doomblade, you know? Doomblade is Doomblade. And for blue has better ways of actually interacting with other creatures, so. Dress Down, too narrow to be playable. Wolf, we talked about this one. Contract from Below. It's illegal. Isn't that the anti-card? It's an anti-card. The problem is you can't play. You're not allowed to play this. They're gonna ban you. Discard your hand and draw 8 new cards, adding the first drawn to your ante. Remove this card from your deck before playing if you are not playing for ante. And then even if you are playing it for ante, you risk losing to the other person who has Contract from Below, and it's gonna, like, it becomes a die roll game. Who won the die roll? If you didn't win the die roll, you might have felt smart. Everyone has a plan until someone uses the same plan against them. But it's too bad to be playable. Sadly. Volcanic Island. Oh, you weren't here, Darkstar. We did that one. Yeah, we did all the duels. Yeah, it was mentioned already. Let's get an unlimited edition Tundra on the up here. It's like a very bad version of every other dual land that exists. Like, yeah, you can fetch this out, but you can also get the... Oops, it's farmland. You can fetch this one out too. It basically does the same thing. But here's the deal. If you top deck this one, like late in the game, you don't flood out because you can cycle this. You're going to cycle this? No, you can't cycle this. There are also lands that add 3 mana. This one only adds 2. So it's just like a strictly worse dual land than all the other dual lands. Some dual lands, they get to surveil. Some gain some life. This is a very boring, generic dual land. It's very at the bottom of the barrel for dual lands. Oh, and with that, I think that's a great way to end the show. All right, thank you for showing up today. Whoops. Hope you all enjoyed that. You can let me know what you think. You know, tell me why you think good cards are bad in the comments section below. If you want to be part of the show, you got to be here 3 p.m. Central Standard Time on weekdays. Thanks everyone who supports the show. If you're a patron on Patreon, a member on YouTube, or use Super Chat to be part of the show, or even Super Chat to help other people be part of the show. And thank you so much, my coffee crew, for being here today, because you guys are what makes the show so fun. People like Christopher B, you're showing up late. Was there like a daylight savings time somewhere? Christopher B, PM, we got Spicy Tortilla, we got Darkstar Ashura, Spyromancy, Bell, Protopon, Nalia, Kano, PM for Ginka, David, old boy, The Hand of Death, and Kagan, because you guys are the show. So as usual, my coffee crew, keep brewing them coffees, and we will keep brewing up the magic. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you at the next cup.